The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Lewes once again. Now this is the smallest one in this entire run of 5, but that doesn't mean it's got the least amount to talk about. Oh no, there's loads of things that I can tell you about this place. Now we're going to be seeing the River Ouse for the first time in this episode later on, but we've got a village to walk around first, and this one contains one of only 3 churches in the entire county of Sussex that has a round tower. This is Southease. Southease, southland overgrown with brushwood. Okay, so yesterday in Rodmell, we learned a lot about Northease Manor. Northease has a southern counterpart, and this is it. Welcome to Southease, the next village down along the Lewes to Newhaven Road. The name seems to be of Anglo-Saxon origin, meaning southland overgrown with brushwood. It's possible that both Northease and Southease take their names from the local salt industry, which was centred on Rodmell. That would make sense because Rodmell is between them. The reference to brushwood could have indicated a small coppice industry provisioning the salt rendering ovens. Little remains of any salted mounds now because farmers have ploughed the land where they once stood. This one's very small and it only really has one landmark in the village itself, that's the church. Dedicated to St Peter, it's one of only 3 churches in Sussex that has a round tower. Interesting stuff. However, Southease has far more to speak of, and it's all centred around the River Ouse. In this video we'll get our first look at the river, because up to now we haven't actually seen it, despite the fact we've been following it all week. The river, a swing bridge that crosses it, and a wharf close by are all linked to the local industry and the engineer William Jessup. We'll learn why during the course of this episode. If you cross the bridge to the other side of the Ouse, you'll come to Southease railway station, and that will get a feature here as well. It's the only railway we'll encounter all week, after all. Let's get into it all and see what Southease can tell us about life on the South Downs. Our walk around Southease will take us in a neat little loop, beginning and ending at the village green, which is on your screens now. As a community, Southease has very little. Most cottages in the village date from the 17th century, and there's next to no new builds. Given how small Southease is, the number of listed buildings it has is remarkable. There are 8 of them in total. These include Southease Place, which is on your screens now. This is probably the one that stands out the most, being a 17th century 2-storey house. Here's another which is practically opposite. This is Thatched Cottage, which was once 2 separate dwellings. It's now been combined into a larger one. It dates from the 18th century and has a thatched hipped roof, hence the name of it. Let's head south now. A lot of the time when walking around Southease, you think you're on barren, empty country roads with hardly anything to make them stand out. You'd be forgiven for thinking that Southease has no history, but trust me, it has quite a bit. A lot of it you can't see though. Let's talk about it as we walk. The village first appears in historical records when King Edgar granted the manor of Southease to Hyde Abbey. It was granted to the abbey again by King Ethelred in 996 AD, which is the earliest possible date for the church that we'll see at the end of this walk. Later, the village was noted in the Domesday Book as comprising 60 households, making it a significant settlement at that time. There are almost certainly less households than that today, meaning Southease has shrunk considerably since. The village history is closely linked with that of Telscombe, which is away to the southwest, much closer to the sea. Historians reckon that the two villages once formed a single community, with Telscombe being an outlier of the mother settlement here in Southease. Telscombe peasants always shared common rights with Southease over their brooklands, and the two manors were both owned by Hyde Abbey for nearly 600 years, from Saxon times until the Reformation. After the dissolution of the monasteries, Southease Manor remained in possession of the king, and in 1546 a man called John Kern was appointed bailiff and collector of the manors of Southease, Telscombe and Hayton. Despite being a manor, there was never a manor house in Southease, as it was always owned by absentee landlords. In the 16th century, the manor passed to the Sackville family. They were headed by Thomas Sackville, his widow Cicely, and their grandson Robert. The population of the parish declined through the 19th century. The 1841 census recorded a population of 120, and by 1891 it stood at a meagre 66. So to walk around Southease, it is a very simple job. It's just basically a nice neat little circle off the Lewes to New Haven Road, and we've reached our first corner because it's effectively like an elongated square. Yeah, the first corner is here, and this pink house at the corner is called Corner Cottage, a very appropriate name. Now just up the road from this there is another grade 2 listed building. In fact, there are 3 grade 2 listed buildings. Let's check these out. Now we've turned a corner and we're heading towards the Lewes to New Haven Road. Along this straight section, we come to Rock Cottage and Barn Cottage. These formed part of one of the village's original farmsteads. Now 2 cottages, with the division having taken place between 1873 and 1899, Rock Cottage forms the western section of the building and Barn Cottage the eastern. Parts of Rock Cottage are 16th century, making it the oldest remaining dwelling in the village. Both are grade 2 listed buildings and stand next to the old southern farmstead. This includes a raft of traditional 18th century buildings. The late 18th century threshing barn, which you can see there, is a dominant feature when you approach the village from the south on the Lewes to New Haven Road. Steep hill passing those houses, let me tell you. Now when you get to the end of the road, you're at the Lewes to New Haven Road. This apparently is a very dangerous junction. In fact, I already know it's a dangerous junction because I've already had to use it once when I did the drive-in. I've got to use it again later, so I've got to be careful. You can't see anything in this direction towards Lewes because of this overhanging tree, so you have to be really, really cautious. I think maybe in the other direction it's a bit easier, but we'll find out later. We need to walk down this for a short way, and as you can tell, there's no footpaths, so so I'm going to have to be careful here. We're going to head back into the village at the other end and head for a few more Grade 2 listed buildings. Southease was important during World War II. Being so close to the sea and to a major river, it's perhaps not surprising that 5 pillboxes were built here. 4 of them stood roughly at the corners of the village, with the 5th just to the north. The former were for rifles and light machine guns, and the latter was for an anti-tank or Hotchkiss gun. As we learned in Rodmell, Southease also had a prisoner of war camp. It contained 16 Nissen huts and was located close to the farm in its northern reaches. The concrete bases of the camp are still visible, but they're on private land and we can't get to them. We have some more listed buildings to look at here, including Black Lamb House, an 18th century 2-storey abode formerly known as the Rest. Over the way is the Old Rectory, an L-shaped building with a 16th century frame. Its western gable bears the date 1604 and the monogram of John Rivers. Okay, just before we have a look at the church, we've got the small matter of the parish notice board to sort out. It's right outside it, so card going on it. And that is Southease in the books. Now, the church. This is one of only 3 in the entire county that has a round tower. Let's check it out. So, given all you've seen so far, you'll agree with me that it's hard to define Southease as a village. It is by default though, owing to the fact it has a church. This is the standout feature of the main cluster, and it's a really interesting little building. Grade 1 listed and dedicated to St Peter, Southease's church has one of only 3 round towers in Sussex, all of which are located in the Ouse Valley. The other 2 are in Piddinghoe and Lewes. All 3 were built in the first half of the 12th century. Now, despite that fact, here in Southease, the chancel and the nave date from the 11th century because they formed part of what was an original building that predated the current one. This used to have a chancel and transepts too, but they were demolished in the 14th century. St Peter's has remains of mural paintings from 1280 on its north and west walls. The church bells were rehung in the year 2000 to mark the millennium. The churchyard is surrounded by mature lime trees and bounded by a flint boundary wall, typical of its type here on the South Downs. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's the beautiful little village that is Southease. Although we're not done with this one just yet, because we still need to go and see the River Ouse, which will be the first time we have seen it in this run. Now, to get to the Ouse, you've got to follow the road past the church down into its valley. It's over there. So let's go and check it out. There's quite a lot to talk about with the Ouse down there, so hope you're ready for a good long section with the water. Now we're following the route of the South Downs Way. It passes through Southease and crosses the River Ouse via a swing bridge. It winds its way through the village and onto a railway station. It's well worth stopping at the river though, for a number of reasons. Here we are at the River Ouse, which has been important to Southease for centuries. Between the 11th and 13th centuries, drainage of the river allowed more crops to be grown around here, but subsequent flooding led to more reliance on fishing. At the time of the Domesday Book, a thriving community was in place, and the village appears to have been the biggest herring fishery in the district, almost 10 times as big as Brighton. Until 1623, the steward of Southease Manor recorded that its tenants were, as was customary, given 6 good herrings at Lent. Mind you, that number was only 4 if you came from across the river from the manorial outlier of Hayton. Nonetheless, it seems even as late as the 17th century, herrings were still easily obtained in a village that's now stranded 4 miles from the sea. The Ouse at this point is almost straight. There's a reason for that. The Ouse Valley was almost certainly a tidal inlet in Norman times because the Domesday Book lists several salt works. They produced salt by evaporating seawater. By the early 14th century, some reclamation of the river's floodplain had taken place, with the construction of embankments to create fertile meadows, but the process was not without risk. The gradient of the river between Lewes and Newhaven is just 6 inches per mile, and that meant floods were, and still are, an ever-present occurrence. Part of the problem of flooding was caused by longshore drift, creating a huge shingle bar across the outlet of the river, which had gradually moved eastwards to Seaford, some 2 miles from its position in Roman times. This restricted both the rate at which water drained from the river and the ease with which boats could reach the river from the sea. One possible solution was to dig a new channel through the bar, and that worked for a while, but it wasn't until 1788 when a more permanent solution was found. William Jessup, a man who was good with canals, was asked to survey the river with a view to extending its navigational prospects. He also recognised that navigation between Lewes and Newhaven was only possible when there were spring tides, and proposed making the channel wider, deeper and straighter to rectify this. The work would include 1,000 yards of new cut to resolve the worst of the meanders, and an Act of Parliament created the Lower Ouse Navigation Company in 1791. A Lewes schoolmaster and civil engineer called Cater Rand was employed as the resident engineer and managed a team of several hundred navvies who worked on the channel from Lewes down to Southease. Unfortunately, the salt water killed fish and polluted a number of wells, but the scheme was generally successful, with the faster moving water scouring the channel at Newhaven and draining the area more efficiently. So what about this bridge we're on then? Well, I have a bit about this too. Before bridges spanned the Ouse, the stock ferry, which operated several hundred yards downstream of the current bridge, was the usual way of crossing it. However, the Lower Ouse Improvement Act in 1791 required the ferry to be replaced with a bridge. It had to be a bridge substantial enough to allow cattle, people and vehicles to pass over while allowing ships to pass underneath. The original bridge then was a wooden cantilever effort, slightly to the north of the current one. It was demolished in 1879 and replaced by the one here today. This is a swing bridge, believe it or not, although it no longer operates as one. It was built in the 1880s, and although the swing mechanism remains, it hasn't been opened since 1967. In September 2009, the bridge was granted a Grade 2 listed building status. It's been through the mill a bit, this one. In 2010, it was closed for 6 months and replaced by a scaffold bridge for walkers and cyclists. Road traffic had to divert, a dogleg route that stretched to some 10 kilometres lengthwise. During that time, the original bridge structure was lifted into the adjacent Environment Agency yard, restored and then replaced. The wrought iron parts of the bridge were strengthened as it had suffered corrosion and twisting of the supports. The turntable, deck and supporting timbers were replaced too. You'll note that the area around the river is still open, lush and green. You're looking at Southease brook pastures, some of which form part of the Lewes Brooks. They still regularly flood in the winter, despite the canalisation of the Ouse. That usually attracts an array of waterfowl and wildfowl. To the north of the bridge we're currently stood on, the pastures are heavily dominated by reeds. It's not uncommon though to find things like wild celery, marsh dock, sea clubrush and bulrush on the pastures. Special plants like greater spearwort and golden dock used to be there too, but now appear to have been lost. Also north of the bridge you may spot the remains of a small wharf. I've no idea what this one would have been used for, but just upstream there's a much larger one. It was called Asham Warf, and it was a crucial point for the Asham and Rodmell cement works. That was in operation from the mid-1920s until 1967. Before the cement works closed, there was an aerial ropeway that ran down a hill to the water's edge, connecting the quarry to the wharf, where barges delivered coal and collected cement. After the cement works closed, commercial river traffic ceased, thus the need for the bridge to open disappeared. Asham Warf is known for another reason. The body of the writer Virginia Woolf was found there on the 18th of April 1941, after her suicide by drowning. So, it doesn't open anymore, but you can still use the bridge if you want to drive over it. It's a good thing you can, actually, because our last landmark is on the other side of it. It's Southease railway station. Now we've crossed the bridge and we're on the eastern bank of the Ouse for the first and only time this week. We've come over the bridge to check out Southease railway station on the Seaford branch of the East Coastway line. The London, Brighton and South Coast Railway opened the station on the 1st of September 1906 as Southease and Rodmell Halt to serve the two villages in the Ouse Valley. The station was renamed Southease on the 12th of May 1980. Now, believe it or not, there used to be a racecourse between the railway line and the River Ouse from the late 1920s to the early 1940s. No physical evidence of that now remains, although the shape of the large field next to the station is somewhat of a giveaway. The station is unmanned and has two platforms. Its self-service ticket machine was installed in 2016. There's a level crossing immediately north of the station leading to Itford Farm and the A26. The crossing is user-controlled with barriers which have to be raised or lowered by those wishing to cross and not a member of railway staff. So this is as far as we can go because we're not farmers and we don't have permission to operate that crossing. That's why it's signposted no access to the A26, because even if you could get over those barriers, you'd have to drive through their farmyard anyway, which is of course private property. We are done with Southease, so it's time to move on to the next one, where we'll be seeing the River Ouse once again. That will do us for Southease, everybody. 4 down and 1 left this week in Lewes. The last one will see us in the final village on the route between Lewes and Newhaven. Again, we'll be right on the banks of the Ouse, but this time we have a much more substantial settlement to walk around. See you there for the last in the run. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.